Good morning. Today we shall engage ourselves um, with the another philosopher, that is Ludwig Feuerbach, and uh, I will be rather focusing a bit on who Ludwig Feuerbach was and what was his contributions to the whole aspect of the development of philosophy, and taking only one aspect of his philosophical ideas, because we do not have the luxury of time to actually uh, talk about various other aspects. So basically today I will try to, as I said, introduce to you who Ludwig Feuerbach was, and what was his contribution to the development of modern philosophy, particularly the you can say the post Hegelian dialectics. And basically I will focus if possible, if we can focus, we shall therefore talk about his critique of Christianity or Christian religion, particularly taking from his written book called The Essence of Christianity, which was published in 1841. So, to begin with, you see, for a few number of years in the mid 19th century, Ludwig Feuerbach actually was a very important philosopher, especially he played a very important role in the history of, as I said, post-Hegelian German philosophy, and particularly in its transition from the whole idealism, whole concept of idealism, to naturalism, materialism, and positivism. And naturalism is certainly the focus of even Charles Fourier, and also Ludwig Feuerbach, and many others. Of course, idealism and other things were the focus of other philosophers. Then we have people like Karl Marx, who were more concerned about materialism, and of course, positivism, contributed by Karl Popper and others. Uh, so, therefore, uh, today people remember him as a non specialist in the history of 19th century religious thought, and that is mainly because he is considered as one who started the debate on the question of uh, religious theology. Okay, and it is this also became the main, you can say, object of Karl Marx's criticism, especially in his famous thesis of Feuerbach, which originally was penned in 1845 and published posthumously by Friedrich Engels as an academics in his book Ludwig Feuerbach and the End of Classical German Philosophy. So, therefore, from all these aspects, we can say that uh, although he was never without his admirers, uh, uh, you can say Ludwig Feuerbach is one of those who popularized scientific materialism, especially in the second half of the 19th century. Not to mention, other theologian, but Feuerbach's public influence was rather at the peak, especially during his time, and it declined rapidly after the failed revolution of 1848 1849. And you see, apart from this kind of philosophical influence, uh, and his continuing interest as a theorist of religion or as a critique of religion. Feuerbach's importance for history of modern philosophy is also due to the very important fact that is the publication of his book, as I said earlier, The Essence of Christianity, published in 1841. And certainly this was to Angel as a symbolic mark, you see, of the end of the period of classical German philosophy, and that had begun 60 years earlier with the appearance, of the writing of Immanuel Kant, called as the Critique of Pure Reason. So, so therefore, you can say that in any case, you can say that Feuerbach's biography and the trajectory of his thinking are both closely intertwined with political and intellectual development, especially in the period, you see, as referred by historians as Walmart's, which extended from 1830 to 1848. So he also remained, although unsuccessful, in his attempt to bring to fruition, or in his attempt to bring about, the philosophy of the future. Yet you can say that Feuerbach is one of those philosophers who has contributed immensely to the to the philosophical ideas of many other people to come, like Karl Marx, Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, Morris, Merleau-Ponty, Alfred Smith, and so many others. You see, so therefore, Feuerbach, as a philosopher, is a very, very important figure for all of us to study, particularly if we are to move forward with our important concepts of socialist ideas, socialist thought, which generally the world or the other people would start with Hegel and Karl Marx, and therefore talk about dialectics, scientific analysis, historical materialism, or the materialist aspect of history, and then talk about many other aspects like imperialism, capitalism, and so on and so forth. So, so therefore, before we move into studying Feuerbach, particularly, as I said, I am more interested to give you a gist of what are his ideas about religion. Yet before we go into that, let us see who Charles Fourier, who is Ludwig Feuerbach. Ludwig Feuerbach, he came from a very intellectual background, you can say. He is the son of a very distinguished jurist known as Johann Anselm Ritter von Feuerbach. And he has a nephew, a neoclassical painter, very renowned neoclassical painter, whose name is Anselm Feuerbach. And this Anselm Feuerbach was the son of Ludwig's older brother, also called as Anselm himself. And he was a classical archaeologist and aesthetician. So therefore, you can see that Ludwig Feuerbach background is all circled by intellectual people. Ludwig's father himself studied philosophy and law at Jena University in 1790 with the Kantian, Karl Reinhold, and many others who belong to the group of distinguished northern German scholars, especially at that time called as the Bavaria, during the period of the administration of Maximilian Mongelus, and therefore he was, despite all these association, he was also raised in a Protestant and religiously devout family, especially in his youth. And he matriculated in theological faculty in the University of Heidelberg in Germany again in 1823. And actually, his father wanted him, he hoped that his son would become another theologist under the influence of great theologians like H.E.G. Paulus and so on and so forth. Uh, but Ludwig was, instead of being drawn to theology, he was being drawn beyond theology, you can say, and he was won instead by speculative theologian known as Karl Dopp, and who was also instrumental in bringing Hegel to Berlin, or bringing Hegel to Heidelberg for his studies, and for for his academic activity. So by 1824, Ludwig had secured his father's grudging permission, you can say. Although, as I said, father wanted him to do something, but grudgingly his father gave him permission to transfer or to move to Berlin under the pretext of wanting to study with theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher, okay, and August Ninder. But Ludwig Feuerbach was greatly drawn, or he was greatly infatuated by Hegel's philosophy, and therefore this is how he also got interested in the theses of Hegel, and later Feuerbach would also challenge the philosophical foundations or the dialectical philosophical foundation of Hegel himself. So, so therefore, you see, during the 1830s, Feuerbach also published 3 books on history of modern philosophy. Of course, in addition to other several essays and reviews that he has written, and among these books, you see the history of modern philosophy from Bacon to Spinoza, published in 1833, was and then he also published a book of history of modern philosophy, presentation, development, and critique of the Leibnizian philosophy, 1837, and Pierre Bayle, a contribution to the history of philosophy and humanity, in 1838. Of course, these were not then translated into English at the point of time, but the first of them won him the praise of great philosophers like Edward Gans, and also invited the review from other great philosophers, and this is how actually he came to be known as a significant philosopher in his time. So during his 1840s, during the 1840s, Feuerbach he corresponded and occasionally visited and maintained close personal relationship with several leading German radicals, including Rugge, Karl Marx, and even radical publishers like Otto Wigan, Julius Froebel, and of course even other revolutionary poets, and therefore this was therefore became partly some of his activities in order for him to be able to bring about a transition from idealism to naturalism to to materialism and positivism, and in that way actually Feuerbach was able to contribute in his writings. So, as I said, although these are very important, there are so many important aspects of uh, um, Charles Fourier's contribution, yet we will not be able to discuss all of them. We will not be able to have time to discuss all of those important, important philosophical contribution of Charles Fourier. However, we will discuss a little bit of his ideas about religion. There is a very famous uh, uh, quote of Feuerbach, where he says that in the Bible, it is said in the book of Genesis, that is the first book of the Bible, that God created man in his own image. But in real life, genuinely, it is the other way around. That is, man has created God in his own image. And he says this is the development of human naturalism, or this is the development of human individualistic approach of religion. So therefore, in 1848, during the revolution of this 1848, Feuerbach claimed that it was man's true culture and true task to take things as they are. To take things as they are. Basically, what Fourier was trying to say is that it is human nature, it is human true nature to accept nature and the parameters or limits that it lays down by its laws as the measure of man's life and his possibilities, which means that man is drawn by naturally, man is drawn by nature. He accepts things as they are, which means as the nature would indicate, or nature would tell him, which means man will definitely take things as they are. For example, whenever the sun rises, man wakes up from his sleep, and whenever the sun sets or night falls in, then he goes to sleep. Means he is responding to nature. Naturally, this is his tendency, and this is how man should accept nature, the parameters or limits laid down by its laws as the measure of his life and its possibilities. So therefore, for Ludwig, this prescription of religion, that you should do this, and so on and so forth, they entail the trajectory of the modern spirit, the epochal movement of the Renaissance and the Reformation, which means to be told that you should go to church and you should not go to church and so on and so forth, they are nothing but the trajectory of modern spirit. Okay, they are actually a prescription of the order being prescribed upon human being, and therefore he says this had given a secular and man-centered focus on human interests and inspirations or aspirations. So therefore he says, while modern science had established a framework of naturalistic empirical norm of inquiry, yet the problem with religion is that they are stuck to whatever has been given, what has been prescribed. While science has evolved, natural science has evolved, yet religion has been stuck to this particular idea of what has been prescribed to us from olden days. So therefore, by saying this, Feuerbach actually tried to prescribe that religion has to evolve along with nature. So therefore, in his one of his lectures, he says, in all other fields, man progresses. In religious matters, he remains rooted to the spot. Okay, he remained rooted to the spot. So, what does it mean? It means that in all other aspects, society is evolving, laws are evolving, human laws are evolving, yet we are rooted to the spot. So, therefore, Feuerbach was definitely sympathetic to Christian religion in respect, particularly to what he claimed was its latent human content. You know, to the natural human content and of what he actually acknowledged as necessary role of the evolution of human spirit. So he says that human spirit evolves in one direction while science is evolving in other direction. But therefore, this in many ways is what he described as sympathy. It is sympathetic. So therefore, Feuerbach, he condemned Christian religion, as is well known, of course, on the question of the philosophical anthropological ground. What he's saying is that theology, therefore, he's saying that theology is superfluous, is superficial. We need to go beyond theology into the realm of philosophical anthropological ground that is subjected, that is subjected man to an illusory idealism that alienated him from himself. So therefore, from all the possibilities of living a truly human being. So therefore, what he's trying to say is that Christian religion, because it is stuck only in philosophy or only in theology, it is not able to go deeper into the philosophical and moreover into the anthropological ground. And therefore, because we are stuck with theology, man is subjected to an illusory idealism. We are under illusion of some ideas that there is God out there and we are here to suffer until we reach to our God. And therefore, because of this, Feuerbach says that this has also limited our possibilities of living a true human and independent life. So therefore, our independence is being restricted because of the fact that our religion has restricted us to an illusory idealism based on the ideas, the theological concepts, and so on and so forth. So in this way, you can say that Feuerbach was therefore, on the one side, a critical theologian, on the other side, a political critic of Christianity, a radical for whom Christian religious illusions constituted the normative basis of hierarchical and authoritarian form of political power, which means that Feuerbach therefore saw religion or saw Christianity as an institution of power, an institution that constituted the hierarchy and authority which forms political power. So therefore, he made the case that a primary task confronting radicalism was to expose and to reject these illusions, to reject the theological illusions, especially based on idealism. So therefore, what we need to understand here is Feuerbach's primary interest was religion, of course, and everything connected with it. And his critique of religion was therefore in the context the context and substance of his political utterance, which means that his critique of religion is because of his political utterance. Okay, it's because of his political or political philosophical commitments. So, therefore, it is important for us to understand some of the key ideas of this critique of his critique of religion. You know, so now Feuerbach, you can see hostility to religion and theology, and the political radicalism was basically that was inseparable. That it was inseparable from itself, and therefore, in this way, Feuerbach tries to take the whole political milieu of restoration of Germany, or Germany restoration movement, which is the outcome of the Reformation and other movements at that point of time. So, therefore, his hostility to religion is because of its, you can say, orthodox nature, because of the fact that it is stuck to its roots, stuck to its context. So, therefore, we can say that Feuerbach's critique or objection to Christianity is shaped, you can say, from this important aspect, you can say that it is shaped from political impulse, but on the metaphysical aspect and philosophical concern was rather he was rather one of the philosophers who wanted to reconcile this disconnect between religion and science, religion and natural science. So, therefore, we can say that his substantive critique of religion is also very much influenced by Hegelian philosophy, and it has risen out of critique of Hegelian philosophy. What is the basis of that Hegelian philosophy? The critique of Hegelian philosophy is, in the history of philosophy, where Hegel tries to say that there is the spirit, and therefore the spirit is the ultimate authority to which human being cannot actually reach, and therefore this is what Feuerbach was trying to critique. This is what Charles Fourier is rather main objection, or rather this is his criticism prior to his break from Hegelianism. So, therefore, on the issue of Christianity, Feuerbach was certainly at odds with Hegel from the outset of his intellectual career, because, as I said, Hegel believed that in his philosophy of history, that people are they are only characters. They are made to do the things, to bring transformation to the society, because it is driven by the spirit. So, therefore, this is the break, or rather, his critique of religion is based on Feuerbach's critique of Hegelianism itself, and Hegelian presentation of what religion is all about. So, so, therefore, what I am trying to do here is to, in its Protestant form, Hegel believes that he has contributed. He has speculated the idea of Christian religion and its understanding. And therefore, he claimed that Christianity as being, Hegel claimed that Christianity is actually the being the realization of what he termed as the absolute religion, or the absolute spirit, the understanding of the absolute spirit, as well as the religious mainstay of modern cultural autonomy and political freedoms. So basically, therefore, Hegel's philosophy of religion, particularly with respect to the mediating claims, you see, we can say that since he believed in idealism, it is also ambiguous. You see, it is also ambiguous in nature. And Hegel himself had described it as inadequate, and Hegelianism became divided into two main schools of interpretation on the issue, on this whole issue, the so-called rights and the so-called left. You see, so therefore, Feuerbach's position on all this issue was therefore associated with what Hegelian was actually trying to propagate, what is the left idea of religion. So therefore, to Feuerbach, he is taking Hegelian philosophy into a different direction, and in his book, therefore, Thoughts on Death and Immorality, in this particular text, he formed a critique of what Feuerbach saw as the fragmented spirituality of contemporary faith, and therefore, from henceforth, Feuerbach will try to bring in some of the important ideas of what are his basis of characterizing a modern Christianity. So therefore, according to Feuerbach, the essential characteristic of a modern Christianity was the centrality of the belief in personal immorality. In personal immorality. So only in the imagination of another, like heavenly world, was it possible to believe that the self could exist in perfect freedom. You see? So therefore, what he's trying to say is that if you are trying to argue that there is centrality of belief in the personal immorality, which means the immorality of Christ, then that can only be possible in the imagination of another heavenly world, which could exist in perfect freedom, which means where there is no more compulsion. So therefore, in Feuerbach's judgment, modern belief therefore was an egocentric, dualistic and life-denying spiritual perversion, which means in modern understanding of Christianity, therefore this modern belief, therefore it is egocentric, which means it is based on my desire that I should be perfect and therefore others should be perfect like me. It is based on dualistic, you see, because then I try to compete or compare with each other, and I try to see things from other perspective, and therefore this is life-denying spiritual perversion, which means it limits human possibilities. So therefore, what Feuerbach was trying to tell us, therefore, like Hegel, he tried to identify man as the subject of the spirit, or the subject of the notion of the infinite spirit, which will lead us into transcendental reality, but of reality as such. And therefore, just like Hegel, he tried to engage him, trying to argue that man is the subject of the infinite spirit. So therefore, um, what he's trying to say is that through man's power of reason and through man's power of command as a subject of the spirit, so therefore, you see, uh, man can bring out the power of reason and consciousness. Since he is able to command, since he is able to have consciousness, then he is also able to have reason and consciousness. So therefore, spirit, he helped actually actually self-conscious community of human being. So when we talk of spirit, therefore it is the self ability of human being to actually to actually realize his own consciousness, self-consciousness. Okay. So therefore, Feuerbach says that man must thus existed in the fullest spiritual sense in a community with others, where he submitted himself in respect of his purely egocentric or finite interest to the universal criteria of a shared self-consciousness. So the capacity of self-transcendence is epitomized, therefore, he says, by love. And therefore he says, or Feuerbach says, this is primary self-consciousness in the human. So this capacity of self-transcendence is, as I said, epitomized by love, and this is the primary idea of self-consciousness in human. So therefore, with this, therefore, man is able or is allowed to be, to be self-surrender, to manifest his self-consciousness, and therefore, in the same way, he is also able to actually present himself as a non-reflective level of nature. So therefore, for man, this negation of from what he has been prescribed to what he naturally can do, so therefore this is actually the in a way his own awareness, is based on his own awareness that he has to one day die. So therefore, what I am trying to say is that in Feuerbach's idea, although religion tries to take us to that level of theological foundation of idealism, yet Feuerbach is trying to say that community and love should be the basis, and we should be aware that this is the necessity, this is the possibility, this will lead us to higher possibility in our spiritual life, in our life, to go beyond the to go beyond theology into understanding the infinite spirit or the absolute spirit, just like what Hegel actually is trying to say. So let me rather stop here, because this is a bit difficult. You may not be able to connect, but tomorrow when I wind up, you will be able to understand what is this critique of religion. Okay, let us stop here first. We have taken the first instance of Hegelian philosophy, and therefore the main aspect for us to understand is what is naturalism and what is actually theology. So therefore, as I said in his writings, we can see that Feuerbach's objection to Christianity prefigured those of his latter writings, and therefore, despite every attempt of Feuerbach to get into the philosophical underpinning ideas of religion, yet he is also being driven by religious theology throughout. Okay, so let me stop here for today, and I hope you have some questions to ask. Kindly ask me now.